Ahoy! We're gonna interrupt our regularly scheduled program today, and that's because Realm Royale Reforged was, well, not exactly announced, but it exists now. And by exists, I mean there is literally a playable version. Not too long ago I talked about Thor being hired by Hi-Rez and that he was apparently working on Realm Royale and that it seemed to be going in a more classic direction, and that is exactly what we're seeing now. And the first version of this Reforged build is now live on the public test server. Now, keep in mind, this is a very important thing. This is not the final version of the game. This is not what the game will look like in the long run. This is a first test version to get feedback to build up upon, apparently over multiple months even, until it gets to a point where it really gets announced to the public. But what exists so far is very much playable. Another thing that I need to mention in the context of the gameplay that you can see is that this was played on the American servers. There are no Australian servers, so I had more than 200 ping. So if it looks janky and jittery, that is not the game, that is just the ping. Because of this ping and the impact it had on me playing the game, I also can't make any major judgments on how the balance overall feels. I will more focus on the changes in themselves. So, the first big thing that I think we should start out with is that there are classes again. Removing classes back in the day was a major aspect of what made Realm Royale feel less unique, so them returning is a very big deal. And obviously with the name Reforged, the general direction of many changes seems to be going back to the roots of Realm Royale, how it originally felt, but obviously keeping many of the advancements that have still been made over the years. Classes come with a few unique perks. At the start of the game, they have their own mobility ability, and throughout the game, they will be able to get unique weapons, 2 per class, as well as multiple different unique abilities, even though there are also general abilities and weapons that can be used by everyone. The warrior gets the heroic leap, and his weapon choices are the throwing axe and the longsword. The hunter gets the grapple hook and can either use a longbow or a crossbow. The mage gets a soar ability and can use a fire staff or ice staff. And the assassin gets a blink and can use a sniper rifle or heirloom rifle. For these class-specific things, you aren't dependent on R&D for the entire game. In the beginning, you'll have to work with what you get from the chests, but later in the game, after you have broken down some items into shards, you can use those shards at the forges, where you can craft items. And the class-specific items that you can craft can be predetermined by choosing your loadout before the game even starts. So you can already kind of decide on your playstyle should you get to the point in the game where you can craft at a forge. Another blast from the past is the return to armor. You can get a helm, breastplate, gauntlets and greaves again instead of runes, with the benefits you can see here. So that'll be very familiar to returning players that used to play back in the day as well. While your movement ability slot is locked, you have 2 additional ability slots, and in those you can slot whatever you want. Now, I don't know how the system was exactly beforehand, but either way, now you can just put any combination in there as long as it's abilities that your class can actually use. Realm Reforged also introduces class chests that give you specific items for your class that you're playing. This is meant to do a multitude of things. For example, it's meant to give you a better early game experience where it's worth looting those chests and having some more engagements happening before you can craft things at the forge. It's also meant to be giving new players an option to experience the unique abilities of their class early in case they are too inexperienced and otherwise die early. And it's also meant to shift the competitive meta a little bit, but that's not really important for us at this point. Talents, which you previously unlocked over time, will be removed from the game in order to make it so that veterans of the game don't have an extra advantage over new players by having these talents unlocked. In return, weapon and ability scalings have been adjusted and cooldowns have been reduced across the board, which I think is a very good approach. I think that an ability-heavy Realm Royale is always better, so generally having shorter cooldowns is in my eyes a very, very good angle. The queues have been changed so that the primary modes now are solos and trios. This is in order to achieve better matchmaking as well as reflect the competitive scene. Within the matches, there are typically 60 players plus NPCs on top of that, and the matches that I had on the test server all had 100 players in total, so 40 bots minimum. The circle sizes have also been changed. This is something you will also notice if you only played when the game came out, just because it is going to start at a smaller circle, relatively speaking, so that there will be more engages happening overall. There are a few new abilities: the Lightfoot Potion, an effect that everyone can use, the Decoy for the Assassin, which gives you brief stealth and sends out a decoy, the Enrage for the Warrior, which buffs him temporarily, and a Fireball for the Mage, very self-explanatory. The Hunter also gets the new mobility ability, the Grapple Hook. Aside of the new Mage weapons, there's also an Auto Sniper Rifle as a new universal weapon. Another back to the roots change that I think will be welcomed is that legendary weapons can no longer drop from normal chests. I know that is something that people were not happy with when it was introduced way back in the day. Now, I've played quite a few games today to figure out if this feels like original Realm Royale. And so far, I would say it doesn't. But that's okay. This is just the start of a journey, and obviously they also don't want to just make original Realm Royale without implementing any changes to it, but rather build something better out of what the game was back then and what it is now. There are some things that I personally think should probably just be straight up removed, but that's also somewhat subjective. What I can say though at this point is that this version of Realm Royale feels much closer to the original than anything we had beforehand since the original. Ideally, of course, we'd end up with a version that is better than the original, and so far I think there is potential here, and it just depends on the outlook of the devs. One thing that I really noticed is that many of the newer elements are still very noticeable in the current version right now. For example, there are loot goblins that can spawn on the map and they make noise and you hear them and then you can find them, and then they are bullet sponges, and if you shoot them often enough, they drop shards and eventually explode and have a chance to give you legendary items. Obviously there's like a risk-reward situation here because anyone around you can hear you shoot that thing and they may come over, blah blah blah, but it's just not fun to shoot a bullet sponge enemy over and over and over in the middle of what's meant to be a PvP focused game. Likewise, I personally, for example, don't like the automatic weapons very much. I think they were a bad addition to Realm Royale from the start. That just was made at a moment where the studio back then was trying to appeal to many of the streamers, many of the shooter streamers that were playing the game, that didn't really understand what made Realm Royale so unique in the first place, which is that was not just another Fortnite. And obviously, especially with Fortnite having a no builds mode now, they need to find a way to set themselves apart. And I've always said the most important things for them to set themselves apart is make the game more ability focused and make the weapons more classic, slow weapons, so that you really feel like you're playing a class. Like you feel like you're playing a warrior, you're going in with your sword, you're using your damaging abilities, and you're not worried about someone sending 20 hit scan bullets per second into your body while doing that. In my personal opinion, the class system could even be expanded upon from what it is right now, since as of now, the classes are mostly set apart in their abilities and weapons, and I think they could even be set apart in their stats. So for example, the warrior could get extra percentage armor or extra percentage health, whereas maybe the assassin gets extra percentage movement speed, and so on. You get the idea, just make every class feel even more like a class. But all of that is subjective. Obviously, someone who likes pure shooters more is gonna lean more away from the suggestions I'm doing here, while someone who's more into like RPGs, for example, would probably be more inclined to agree with me. Who Hi-Rez ultimately ends up catering to is purely their decision, but I hope they are not trying to cater too hard to the purely shooter-focused crowd, because I think that niche is simply saturated between Apex Legends and Fortnite's no-builds mode. There's just not that much market space there for someone with a similar concept with another Battle Royale shooter-focused game. So I think going the other direction is probably preferable, and in that regard, Realm Royale now has a very, very good foundation. Of course, even if the final product is fantastic and everyone likes the remake of Realm Royale, it is gonna have a hard time establishing itself if it doesn't land perfectly with the initial return hype. I know some pro players, even from other games, will definitely check it back out when the announcement for Reforged is made, but by then the game has to be very, very good. In order to achieve that, they obviously need feedback. And if you're interested in Realm Royale and you want to see the newer version of it, then I would recommend downloading the test server. It's on the normal Steam site for Realm Royale, and you can just download the test server there, you can select it there, and give them your feedback on the Realm Royale Discord, so they know how you feel about the game, what direction you would like it to go in, so that ultimately the final product is the best it can be for everyone. It is also worth pointing out that it's a relatively small team working on this, so changes are going to be relatively slow. This is not Hyra's main project at the moment from what we know, but I think it's still a promising one. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for Realm Royale Reforged, and I hope especially those of you who are in EU and NA, so you can get a better testing experience, will be able to check it out and just get your own feel and submit your own feedback. I will of course keep you updated about future developments, so if you are new to the channel, please consider subscribing and clicking the bell if you want to see that, or if you're interested in Smite or Multiverses videos. Next one will be a LeBron guide, which I had to postpone for this one a little bit. And other than that, I thank you very much for watching, and hope to see you for the next one soon. SLOTH, out.